5 American Wars. 5 families grew wealthy, not through speculation, but via lucrative government contracts. Let's examine the pattern that transformed these dynasties into billionaires while millions lost their lives. Throughout U.S. history, a business model more profitable than oil, more steady than banking, and more protected than any monopoly has thrived. It's this model that has sustained the wealth of these families across 6 generations, funding political careers, university endowments, and charitable foundations, built on one simple premise: profit from war, any war, every war. As soldiers perish and taxpayers foot the bill, a select few companies consistently emerge victorious. Their contracts are public, their profits well documented, and the pattern unmistakable. The DuPont family, known for explosives and chemicals, has profited from every American conflict from the Revolutionary War to Iraq, spanning over 2 centuries. The Rockefellers, masters of oil and fuel, leveraged wars from the Civil War to Afghanistan to establish a near-permanent energy monopoly. The Morgans, patriarchs of banking, financed wars from the Spanish-American to World War II, profiting by lending to governments on both sides. Lockheed Martin's predecessors built an empire of aviation and weaponry, with profits dating back to World War I, ongoing today. Halliburton, specializing in military logistics and infrastructure, played a crucial role from World War II through the War on Terror, consistently awarded no-bid contracts laden with cost overruns. Tracking their shared profits reveals a clear pattern. War is declared, stock prices ascend, contracts flow, profits skyrocket, and once hostilities end, they retain the gains. When the next conflict looms, these companies are ready, because they didn't just profit from war. They helped engineer the conditions making war inevitable through lobbying, political donations, and foreign policy influence. This is not conspiracy. It's capitalism pursuing conflict, with receipts recorded in public. Consider the DuPonts, pioneers of the American military-industrial complex. While their name is often associated with chemicals or Teflon, their foundation was built on gunpowder, a staple for over 2 centuries of warfare. Elitaire DuPont, who arrived from France in 1800, was a trained chemist with experience in French gunpowder mills. Recognizing the expanding needs of post-revolutionary America, he established the DuPont Company in 1802 on the Brandywine River in Delaware, strategically positioned near Philadelphia and Washington, with accessible water power and a safe distance from major cities to avoid political backlash. By the time of the War of 1812, DuPont was already supplying gunpowder to the U.S. military, establishing the earliest link in a chain of long-standing government contracts and industrial expansion. A powerful pattern was set, one that would repeat over a span of 200 years. War erupts, the government demands explosives, and DuPont, equipped with pre-existing facilities, steps in to secure the contracts. Production ramps up, revenues soar, and after hostilities cease, they retain the infrastructure, patiently waiting for the next conflict to fuel their profits. During the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848, DuPont supplied gunpowder for artillery and small arms, securing a contract exceeding $1 million, roughly $35 million in today's dollars. More crucially, this established DuPont as the military's favored supplier, ensuring they would be first in line for subsequent wars. The Civil War marked DuPont's true breakthrough. With unprecedented demand, their mills, operating around the clock, produced over 4 million pounds of gunpowder, earning over $10 million, equivalent to more than $300 million today. These figures only reflect direct sales. DuPont also supplied private vendors who resold to the government at a markup. Remarkably, despite ideological differences, they being Northern Democrats who opposed abolition, families within DuPont still sold gunpowder to the Union, recognizing that profits mattered more than politics. After the war, DuPont was celebrated as a patriotic entity that had helped save the nation, erasing the complex moral landscape behind their dealings and highlighting only the gains. The First World War turbocharged DuPont's rise from a major enterprise into a dynasty. Prior to America's entry in 1817, they had sold explosives to Britain and France. When the U.S. joined in 1817, Production surged as they built new factories, recruited thousands, and supplied 40% of all explosives used by Allied forces. Profitability skyrocketed. Net earnings leaped from $5 million in 1914 to over $82 million in 1918, equivalent to over $1 billion today. Over 4 years, profits increased by a staggering 1,600%. Crucially, after the war, DuPont didn't reinvest those gains into restricting their empire. Instead, they diversified into chemicals, plastics, and synthetic materials, transforming their wartime profits into a robust peacetime industrial empire. Yet, they continued to sell to military clients. World War II marked another golden era. DuPont supplied explosives, nylon for parachutes, and even played a role in the Manhattan Project, operating the plutonium production at Hanford, Washington. Their contracts, based on a cost-plus model, guaranteed payment for expenses along with a profit margin, leaving the government bearing all risk. Following that, conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan all saw DuPont or its successor firms providing essential materials. Though the family's wealth persisted into the 21st century, their direct involvement in defense industries diminished, especially after the defense division spun off and merged into other corporations. Nevertheless, the dynasty's financial strength remained intact, built solely on the foundation of war. The Rockefeller family's hold on oil, an essential resource for modern militaries, spanned over a century of strategic influence and vast fortune. Founded in 1870, John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil quickly grew to dominate 90% of America's oil refining by 1880, forming a true monopoly rather than just a business enterprise. As war loomed, this control became an invaluable asset. During the Spanish-American War of 1898, a relatively brief conflict, the significance lay in the Navy's shift from coal to oil-powered ships. Standard Oil's fuel became vital, taught a crucial lesson: master the energy supply, and you control the military. Even after the breakup of Standard Oil in 1911 due to antitrust laws, successor firms like Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron continued to supply the U.S. military and its allies, turning hundreds of millions in profits. The Rockefeller strategy diverged from the DuPont approach. They didn't limit sales to one side. Their German subsidiary sold fuel to Germany during the First World War through neutral channels, rendering the act legal, not treasonous. Profits from both sides made Rockefeller the wealthiest family in America, with John D. becoming the world's first billionaire. A diversified empire in banking, real estate, and philanthropy grew beside their oil legacy, but oil remained the foundation. In the Second Global Conflict, the pattern persisted. Rockefeller firms supplied fuel to the United States military through exclusive contracts and cost-plus arrangements, ensuring profits regardless of costs. An investigation into Standard Oil of New Jersey revealed they had continued sharing patents for synthetic rubber with IG Farben of Germany even after hostilities began, aiding the enemy's war prolongation. Though Senate hearings, led by future President Harry Truman, condemned these actions, no prosecutions followed. Too vital was their fuel to the war effort. Every subsequent conflict, from Korea and Vietnam to the Gulf War, saw the same story. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and other successor companies supplied the military, reaping enormous profits. Recognizing the political risks, the Rockefeller family gradually divested from direct oil interests in the 1970s but retained their wealth. Their influence on war and energy remains a potent reminder of the enduring power of strategic monopoly. The Rockefeller family's fortune, currently estimated at $11 billion, was built upon oil sold to armies that consumed it amidst war. Meanwhile, the Morgan banking dynasty specialized in war financing. Understanding early that conflicts demand more than weapons and fuel, they require money. Those who lend these funds profit regardless of who emerges victorious. Founded in the 1870s, J.P. Morgan's empire by the turn of the century had become the most influential bank in the United States. Morgan grasped a vital truth that would shape a century of war profits. Governments at war borrow at any cost because they have no real alternative. Their survival hinges on funding, so Morgan's loans became integral to warfare. During the Spanish-American War of 1898, Morgan extended credit to the U.S. government. small loans that cemented a pivotal relationship. Trust was established, and Morgan profited from the accruing interest. World War I marked a shift. Though America remained officially neutral when the war erupted in Europe in 1914, Morgan-led banks loaned over $2 billion, equivalent to more than $50 billion today, to Britain and France between 1914 and 1917. These funds fueled purchases of weapons, food, and supplies, much of which came from American companies. In essence, America's financial support flowed directly into the war effort, securing profits for lenders on both sides. The critical insight is that these loans rendered American neutrality impossible. By 1917, Britain and France owed vast sums to U.S. banks. A defeat for the Allies risked triggering a financial collapse in America. If they lost, they couldn't settle their debts, leading to economic turmoil at home. Recognizing this, President Woodrow Wilson's call for war in April 1917 wasn't solely about defending democracy or confronting German aggression. It was fundamentally about safeguarding American financial interests. Senator George Norris of Nebraska candidly expressed the sentiment in the War Declaration debate. "We are going into war upon the command of gold. We are about to put the dollar sign on the American flag." Though Norris opposed the war, Congress authorized it, securing Morgan's loans with the backing of U.S. military might. Post-war, Morgan profited anew. Germany owed reparations to the Allies, who in turn owed money to America. Morgan orchestrated the loans that allowed Germany to meet its reparations, funds then used by the Allies to repay U.S. loans, with fees collected at every step. The 1924 Dawes Plan and the 1929 Young Plan, both structured by Morgan's bank, refinanced billions in war debt, netting Morgan millions in profits. This pattern of financing persisted into the next global conflict. Before America entered World War II, Morgan banks financed British war procurements. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government borrowed heavily, issuing war bonds and treasury securities, all underwritten by Morgan banks, who amassed fees on each issuance. Following the war, Morgan's influence extended into rebuilding Europe through the Marshall Plan, managed partly through Morgan-connected institutions. Throughout the Cold War, covering Korea, Vietnam, and beyond, the demand for financing continued unabated. The major banks of Morgan's lineage supplied the funds, profiting from interest and fees as global conflicts persisted. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more content like this. By then, Morgan banks, now part of J.P. Morgan Chase, played a consistent role, underwriting government debt, financing defense contractors, and profiting through fees and interest. While the family no longer manages daily operations, their amassed wealth endures, estimated at around $30 billion, built upon lending money for wars and collecting interest as soldiers paid the ultimate price. Turning to Lockheed Martin, or more precisely, the lineage of companies that merged into it, the aerospace sector has thrived on wartime profits since the era of World War I. The Lockheed brothers, later spelling their name Lockheed, established their aircraft firm in 1912. By the time of the Great War, they were manufacturing planes for the military, initially on small contracts and with experimental designs, recognizing that aviation represented the future. Their early involvement positioned them to enjoy a century of lucrative contracts. During World War I, aircraft were used primarily for reconnaissance and limited bombing, but the technology's potential was blatant. Post-war, military aviation contracts dwindled, forcing many aircraft companies into bankruptcy. Lockheed adapted by focusing on civilian aircraft, yet preserved vital military ties. World War II marked their breakthrough, as aircraft became critical assets, bombers, fighters, transports, all essential to victory. Lockheed rolled out the P-38 Lightning fighter, with over 10,000 units produced, and the Hudson bomber, with more than 2,000 copies. These contracts were worth hundreds of millions of dollars, a substantial sum at the time. But Lockheed's true innovation lay in forging strategic relationships with the Pentagon. They employed former military officers as executives, established factories in congressional districts where representatives relied on the jobs created, and made themselves politically untouchable. Their integration into defense circles ensured continued dominance. After the Second World War, Cold War tensions kept the flow of contracts vigorous. Lockheed developed iconic aircraft like the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, and the enduring C-130 cargo plane. Each decade, new contracts perpetuated their growth. Their approach was always consistent: produce sufficiently advanced equipment, underbid or minimize initial costs, secure the contract, and then inflate costs once the project was underway because cancellation was politically and financially unfeasible. Take, for example, the C-5 Galaxy transport plane. Its initial contract in 1965 was valued at $2.1 billion, but by completion, the actual expenditure soared to $5.3 billion, over 150% beyond initial estimates. Was Lockheed at risk? Not at all. Operating under a cost-plus agreement, they were reimbursed for all expenses plus a profit margin. The government, having already invested billions, couldn't pull out without incurring greater costs, ensuring Lockheed's profits. Congress supported the project because it preserved thousands of jobs, especially in key states. Every conflict, Vietnam, Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, brought additional Lockheed contracts. The consolidation of the military-industrial complex by the 1990s saw Lockheed merge with Martin Marietta, forming the behemoth we know today as Lockheed Martin. With revenues reaching $65 billion in 2023, the vast majority, around 90%, comes directly from government contracts. The pattern of profit, being always the same, continues today. The F-35 fighter jet stands as the most costly military project in history. Its initial budget was set at $233 billion, yet today's estimates soar beyond $1.7 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T. That's 7 times over the original figure, and Lockheed Martin continues to receive payments. Every budget overrun is absorbed by the Pentagon because canceling the project is politically and financially unviable. Too much has already been invested, and too many jobs in key districts depend on it. Although the Lockheed family no longer directly controls the company, it's now publicly traded. The shareholders reap enormous profits. The long-standing pattern persists. War is declared, Lockheed's stock surges, contracts are awarded, costs spiral beyond estimates, and the government pays the extra, enriching shareholders, and the cycle repeats endlessly. Switch now to Halliburton, the military logistics giant that transformed wartime support into an art form. Founded in 1917 by Earl Halliburton, it started as an oil services firm specializing in cementing oil wells. But the founder recognized that infrastructure, whether oil-related or military, was immensely profitable. By the time of the Second World War, Halliburton was constructing bases, airfields, and ports for the military. The formula was straightforward. The military needs infrastructure swiftly. Halliburton has the expertise and equipment, and there's no room for competition. No-bid contracts are awarded because there's no time for bidding. The company builds the facilities on a cost-plus basis, ensuring they're reimbursed for all expenses plus a guaranteed profit, leaving no risk of loss. During the Korean War, Halliburton built bases and infrastructure. In Vietnam, through its subsidiary Brown and Root, it expanded to constructing roads, ports, and airfields across South Vietnam, amassing contracts worth billions of dollars, all awarded without competitive bidding, thanks to political connections. George Brown, founder of Brown and Root, was a major donor to Lyndon B. Johnson, whose political career was partly funded by him. When Johnson became president, Brown and Root secured massive Vietnam contracts. Coincidence? Maybe, but the pattern is unmistakable. Political donations, access to power, lucrative government contracts, and profit. The Gulf War of 1991 revived Halliburton's role. Dick Cheney, then Secretary of Defense, awarded millions of dollars in no-bid contracts to firm facilities in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. After the conflict, Cheney left government service to become CEO of Halliburton in 1995, remaining until 2000, when he entered the vice presidency under George W. Bush. Subsequently, during Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns, Halliburton, through its subsidiary KBR, secured over $40 billion worth of contracts. Again, no bid, cost-plus arrangements. The costs were staggering. Billions wasted on meals never served, fuel deliveries that never materialized, and construction projects that remained incomplete. When challenged, Halliburton justified this waste, citing the chaos of war zones as an inevitable excuse, and the government continued to pay. This pattern, large corporations securing lucrative contracts through political ties, escalating costs, and minimal accountability, has defined military-industrial operations for over a century. It is a cycle driven and sustained by strategic positioning, political influence, and systemic acceptance that waste and overcharges are part of wartime logistics. Dick Cheney, serving as vice president, recused himself from decisions on contracts involving Halliburton, his former company. Yet, during his tenure from 2003 to 2008, Halliburton secured a surge of contracts, increasing by 400%, while its stock value tripled. Even after leaving office in 2009, Cheney held stock options worth millions. This exemplifies a recurring pattern. Companies appoint politicians as executives, leveraging relationships within government to secure lucrative contracts once wars erupt, sharing profits as politicians become wealthy and corporations amass more wealth, all at taxpayers' expense. This pattern spans over a century across the top 5 families and their companies. They position themselves well before conflict begins. DuPont ramping up explosive manufacturing in peacetime, Rockefeller consolidating oil refining, Morgan forging banking alliances, Lockheed maintaining military ties between wars, and Halliburton building infrastructure expertise. When hostilities start, they're prepared, giving them an edge over less connected competitors. Next, they secure the initial contract, often awarded without bidding, justified by national security. Once established as dependable suppliers, subsequent contracts become easier. These agreements are typically cost-plus, allowing the companies to bill the government for all expenses plus a guaranteed profit margin, removing financial risk for the contractor. Overruns are common, with defense projects like the F-35 soaring 7 times over budget, revealing this isn't incompetence but the core business model, underbidding early and inflating costs later. This cycle continues because governments are hesitant to cancel large projects once investments are made, pouring more taxpayer money into over-budget systems that line contractors' pockets. Former military officers often transition into roles within these companies, ensuring a revolving door that facilitates ongoing influence. Generals and admirals moving seamlessly between service and industry. Meanwhile, defense companies pour millions into lobbying efforts, funding campaigns, think tanks, and advocacy groups to influence policy and promote further conflicts. They produce research, fund advertisements, and even hire retired officers to bolster the case for war, all reinforcing the cycle of profit extraction from global conflicts. This repeated pattern highlights a system where strategic positioning, guaranteed contracts, inflated costs, entrenched relationships, and relentless lobbying coalesce over a century, creating an entrenched business model of war profiteering that benefits a select few at profound public and human cost. The influential think tanks, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and the American Enterprise Institute, both received funding from defense contractors and consistently released reports supporting military interventions. In 2002, during debates over Iraq, these contractors financed organizations that produced intelligence favoring invasion. They advertised, hired retired generals to promote war on television, and once the decision was made, they reaped billions in contracts. Did these companies manufacture the war? Not directly, but they certainly shaped the environment, making conflict more likely, and profited handsomely when it occurred. The next step was to diversify these war-derived profits. For instance, DuPont used explosive sales to expand into the chemical industry. Rockefeller leveraged oil profits to acquire banking and real estate assets, and Morgan reinvested war-lending earnings into everyday industries. This strategy ensured that even after hostilities ceased, wealth accumulated and remained within the families that built these empires, dynasties forged through decades of profit from conflict. To grasp the scale, consider this. Since 1802, DuPont earned roughly $50 billion from military contracts in inflation-adjusted dollars. Rockefeller's companies sold more than $100 billion in fuel to the military since 1898. Morgan's banks generated over $75 billion in interest and fees from war financing. Lockheed Martin and its precursors have accumulated over $200 billion in aircraft and systems since 105 years ago. Halliburton, over $60 billion in logistics and infrastructure since the 1940s. In total, these five giants and their ancestors have extracted well over $485 billion from taxpayers through documented contracts. This sum doesn't even account for profits from rising stock values, real estate, or industries built with war capital. If you included all those indirect gains, the total soars beyond $1 trillion. And all this money comes from the public coffers. Every dollar paid to DuPont for explosives was taken from workers' taxes, and every dollar spent on Halliburton's logistics came from deficit spending that future generations will carry. This isn't the profit of typical business. It's a transfer of public funds into private pockets, justified by the guise of national security and war. So, is this pattern still ongoing? Absolutely. Today's figures reveal it vividly. In 2023, the U.S. military budget soared past $816 billion. The top five defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman, claimed over $200 billion of those funds. That's a quarter of the entire defense budget funneled into just five companies. These corporations orbit around political power. They employ former Pentagon officials, influence Congress, and strategically position factories. For example, Lockheed's FBNUS 35 program involves suppliers in nearly every state. 90 senators have constituents dependent on this single aircraft project, ensuring continued support despite the program's cost overruns and technical flaws. This pattern of profit and influence persists, built into the very fabric of how modern military-industrial complex operates, ensuring that war continues to serve private interests at the expense of public resources. If you found this eye-opening, remember, understanding this pattern is key to grasping how power truly works behind the scenes. And if you enjoyed this overview, please subscribe for more content like this. Casting their influence before conflict erupts, these entrenched families and corporations secure their foothold, building production capacity during peacetime, consolidating monopolies, and establishing crucial government ties. When war is declared, they swiftly land no-bid contracts, justified by urgent national security needs, ensuring their dominance from the outset. Once contracts are awarded, the pattern persists. Costs are deliberately overestimated or inflated, allowing them to bill the government for more than what's justified, guaranteeing profits through cost-plus agreements. Over time, overruns become routine, as delays and bloated expenses are absorbed and passed along, making excess costs the norm rather than exception. Meanwhile, retired military officials transition seamlessly into lucrative roles as corporate executives, weaving a revolving door that cements their influence and ensures these companies maintain their immune shield. Lobbying intensifies, with funds directed toward congressional campaigns and think tanks, cultivating policies that perpetuate warfare, sometimes encouraging or prolonging conflicts for further profits. As wars unfold, these firms' profits soar, fueling stock prices, expanding industries, and enriching shareholder wealth, while the soldiers fighting abroad and ordinary taxpayers footing the bill remain the only ones not benefiting. Despite evident wrongdoing, fraud, overcharging, even criminal misconduct, no one serves jail time. Investigations culminate in modest fines, a fraction of the amassed gains, allowing these corporations to continue their operations unimpeded. For a century and a half, this cycle has persisted across every major American conflict. From the inception of contracts to cost overruns and corporate immunity, the pattern is clear. These families and firms profit immensely, while the broader public bears the cost. Elevate the regulators. Lobby relentlessly for more, all to line their pockets while others perish. This is not a conspiracy. It is etched into documented history. The contracts are public knowledge, and the profits are meticulously recorded. The pattern is impossible to deny, and yet it persists today. The pressing question remains, will anyone put an end to it? History suggests they won't. The corporations wield overwhelming influence. Politicians are too reliant on them. The public is too distracted to notice or care. If this reshapes your understanding of military spending, that war is fundamentally a business model, then you're beginning to recognize the pattern. 5 families, billions in profit, built upon wars that have claimed millions of lives. Recognize this. If you want to grasp how true power operates, this knowledge is essential, because they won't teach you this in school. Instead, they'll tell you these companies are patriotic, that they serve the nation, that war profiteering is merely a conspiracy theory. But the contracts are public record, and the repeating pattern has spanned a century and a half. 5 families, every war, producing the same outcome. They profit, we pay, soldiers die.